welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Nice to have you, Harry. So, obviously, today we are talking about what is therapy. So, I find it fascinating when newbies come to therapy and when people are talking about it on social media, etc. Because there's kind of this image that people have of sitting in this room, candles, sofa, talking things out, someone listening, and no one really actually knows like what is therapy, what can I
Mm.
get from it, how am I going to benefit? What does it look like? Is it this mystical, magical thing that happens? And I think sometimes that can make people quite scared in what to expect, how to approach it, are they doing it right, these kinds of things. So I thought we could demystify some of this today and just talk about the basics of what it actually is. So I guess let's start there in how would you describe what it looks like? So in practice, in the room, just the
Mm.
basic level of what does it look like?
Yeah, I think you're so right. The perceptions of it, and I think because once you've spent years training and maybe years practicing as well, it's hard to put yourself back in that place of remembering what it feels like to be going through the door for the first time, not being sure what to expect. And I guess in some ways, like my feeling is uh, what people expect of it is sort of what it is. You do go and sit with another person and you talk about the things that are bothering you. I guess, how that works and what's involved in that. Maybe we can talk about a bit more later on, but at a very basic level, you're sitting in a room with a person who wants to understand what you're experiencing as deeply as they can.
Yeah, I agree. It's a two-way, meaningful conversation at depth with someone who's trained. So, what's the difference then on the back of some of that in having a deep and meaningful conversation with someone that wants to help, that's a friend, for
Mm.
example, or your parent? What's different in it, do you think?
It's a great question. And depending on who you're talking to, sometimes the difference is much narrower than people might expect. I guess the thing for me that really sticks out is that um, a therapist is not going to offer you suggestions. They quite unlikely to offer you an opinion. They're not going to tell you what they think you should do about it or pass judgment on what you're explaining. They're trying very hard to stay with your personal experience in a very non-judgmental way. And I think the benefit of that is that you, as a client, your experience becomes the priority and you're not trying to adjust what you're saying to match up with what someone's suggesting you should do or to say, oh, yeah, I've already thought about that.
So then, if a therapist is not putting in their own opinion or their expectations, are they just listening, sat there and repeating you back what happens?
Mm. Yeah, and I think this is something I was sort of reflecting on this, what that experience of being accepted feels like. And I think for some people, when they hear about therapy, what they're hearing is, so this person's just going to sit and listen to me. Like, how is that going to help? And I think there's two parts of my answer to this. I think on the one hand, I think sometimes you don't realize the benefit of being accepted in that way until you experience it. I think lots of people have never really had that experience of someone listening to them and just going, okay, like I hear what you're saying without any judgment, without any coloring of, well, I don't agree with you, or yes, you're right about that, and just allowing your experience to be as it is. That experience is pretty unique and pretty powerful as well, I think. But I suppose the other angle of that is, and particularly as you develop the relationship with the therapist, they will be offering back reflections of what they're hearing. So they might be pointing out things that you're saying that you'd kind of brushed over without realizing it. Things that might be really important, but that you've got used to not giving airtime or not giving the gravity that they deserve, or maybe patterns that are arising or contradictions in your experience that were beneath the surface. And the counselor or therapist can identify those things, they can point them out to you, they can reflect it back, never from a place of judgment, but from a place of curiosity, like, what does this mean? when we're saying this thing, but we're acting in this way. What's going on? Why is that happening? And it allows us to get deeper into that experience.
Yeah. So a therapist doesn't just sit in silence then and kind of just agree with everything. There is that deeper exploration on some of these areas that you're bringing into the session yourself.
Yeah, I'd say so. And that is a bit of a stigma, isn't it, about therapy? I think that, um, oh, well, you've just gone to therapy and your therapist agrees with everything you said, and now you can't hear what anyone else has got to say. I don't think that's the case. Certainly, I would hope that that's not the case.
And this is key, isn't it? Because if it is that, firstly, the person is going to feel that disconnect anyway, because there's just this person mute in front of them. You're not going to get anything from that as such. There's a place for silence, but not the whole session. And yeah, I imagine that is frustrating. I've had therapists in that similar kind of style too, and it does make it really difficult to connect and to go deeper into things. People want those like nudges, don't they? And
Mm,
exactly what you said of like, oh, I see this pattern. Where is that coming from? Or bringing up things that has been brought in anyway, and things that is from that person's experience. Also, other things from theory. Obviously, a lot of the time people forget we are trained in
mm,
this, and there's theories like swimming through our mind, even though not in the session, it looks like a conversation, but in our mind, it's all there, kind of been brought in, different interventions, different things going on. But there's lots of parts to it, and it is a difficult one to explain. And there is a lot of stigma around the benefits of it and kind of the echo chamber that it could be if it is just someone sat in silence and agreeing with everything. There is challenge parts to it as well, isn't there? And there's things that it pushes you to reflect on and almost puts a mirror up so that you face yourself, isn't it? And your life and your
mm.
decisions and the things that have happened and all that kind of stuff, which we'll go into a little bit more later as well. And it is important, isn't it? Because if we don't do these things, we then don't develop the awareness, therefore, we don't build change because we're not taking action based on the awareness, we're not approaching life intentionally. But also, there's a fine line in being able to challenge that person or direct them in a way of what their purpose is, what they want from sessions too, so they don't get stuck on loop or other things. I know we've spoke about this recently, Harry. It's not just this conversation where someone sits and listens and there's this magical wand that everything's
Mm.
fixed really quickly.
Yeah, agreed. I think the word challenge in therapy always sits a little bit uncomfortably for me because I think that is what we do sometimes with clients. But I think it can give like an impression of an argument almost of like, oh, you've said
Mm.
this thing and I don't think you're right when you say that, or I don't agree with you. And I don't think that's how it feels when you're in that room, really. It's more like, I've noticed you said this thing and you also said this thing, and I can't see how those two things go together. Can you tell me more about what those two things mean to you and how they connect in your life? So it is challenge, and we use that word, don't we, when we're talking about like skills in therapy. But I think for a person coming to therapy, that can feel quite scary. Oh, I'm going to be challenged here. You are going to feel challenged at times. Definitely, sometimes you might feel quite uncomfortable, but you're going to ideally, hopefully, be held by that therapist, feel safe with them, not feel like they're trying to catch you out, trying to trick you, trying to prove you wrong, because that's not what it's about.
Very beautifully put too. Okay. What do you think therapy is for? What's the purpose of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess the decision is a very personal one, isn't it? When to go to therapy? Do I need to go to therapy? Do I want to go to therapy? Um, I think for me, I guess there's kind of two categories that feel like the kind of umbrella categories, really, of like, I know there's something wrong. This thing has happened to me, or I feel like this, and I don't want to feel like this. There's something very obvious in my life that I want to go and talk about. And then there's this other category of like, something just doesn't feel quite right, but I don't know what it is. I don't feel like I'm where I need to be, but I can't work out why. I don't understand. what this experience is. And I think both of those categories are both areas where therapy can be really helpful. I think sometimes you get people feeling like, I need to be able to say, this thing happened to me and now I feel like this and that's why I'm here. But actually, sometimes a client turns up and says, I don't really know why I'm here. I don't really know what I want to talk about. I just don't feel okay right now. Or I just feel like everything could be better than it is. And I think that is surprisingly rich ground. Actually, sometimes coming in not knowing is more powerful than coming in with a really clear idea of what you want to talk about.
Yeah. And this is a really key thing, isn't it? Because people often think that something has to be going wrong or that they have to be in a really bad place always. And
Mm.
there's lots of labels thrown around, isn't there, of I need therapy because I have this thing and there's a label insert here. So there's lots of things, isn't there, that do come up that do pull people towards it. But ultimately, it's self-exploration. So you can come if those things in your life are a struggle, but you also can come if you want to explore who you are, what you want in your life. I do a lot of entrepreneur and coaching type therapy type stuff too, kind of combined together. And we explore all kinds of things, and it's not that their life is necessarily a struggle for them in so many ways, because obviously everyone has something, but there is different kinds of work that comes into that of am I being my true self and living the
Mm.
life that I truly want to live right now? And that's a big question, and a lot of people would struggle to answer that, and it probably feels really daunting too, because it's those bigger things, isn't it? But these are the types of things also that people come. So it can be based on those struggles and it can be based on I want to explore me, life, my beliefs, where I'm going, what is the meaning of this life that I'm living. And there's so much that comes into it. But yeah, people kind of feel that it has to be worst case scenario or absolutely on their knees, desperate before they'll access help. And then, yeah, the labels and things like that don't necessarily always help too. That can lead to a lot of learned helplessness. And I purposely don't market based upon labels because they're important and they can be helpful, but they also can also cause a lot of problems, and it can put a barrier into what you explore in the session because everything comes down to this label, which is kind of a little bit of a sidestep there. But yeah, these things, there's not a right or wrong, is there? I guess ultimately is what we're both saying is in when someone accesses therapy, you don't have to have this rigid, I have this, I want to work on this, and that's
Mm.
what I'm going to stick to.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. And I think one of the things you kind of called out there was this experience of living life in a way that doesn't feel like it connects with who you really are. I think most of us can probably relate to that feeling at some point in our lives. Some of us go through a lot of our life feeling that way, and therapy is a really powerful tool for understanding. So, what is it that I really am? How do I want to be living? And actually, why am I not doing that? What are the things that are getting in the way of me being what I want to be? Um, and yeah, just touching on your comment about labels as well, I guess, particularly, in the practice of person-centered counseling, um, the important thing is that person's unique experience. And when it comes to labels in mental health or anything in mental health, everything is unique to an individual. We don't have the framework at the moment really to clearly it's not like you can say, oh, my leg's broken in this place
Yeah.
specifically. Everyone's experience is so different, so unique, and affected by so many different factors. Sometimes coming back to that label brings us up too many levels out of what it feels like uniquely for you as a person. So I think I agree with you. The label can be really powerful for lots of people and can be really helpful in loads of different ways. But when you're in therapy, being able to get below that into, so what's it like for you, is really important.
Yeah. Tuning it into the human experience
Mm.
overall. Um, I mean, I guess this points out, though, for me, this is our approach, isn't it? And obviously,
Mm-hmm.
you're part of the practice too. And we're very similar, actually, in a lot of the things that we discuss. So, There is a part of this that will be approach led, and there are other practices and other approaches that will be completely different. And I think that's important to point out as well, because there are different approaches in therapy. Not all clients know that, not all clients fully understand that, and that's fine because they don't necessarily have to. It's more important to find someone you click with and that the process resonates for you. There are different approaches though, and there are some questions that do come up around bits of this. So, for example, I'm integrative and I integrate a lot of humanistic, which is a person centered cluster as well. And I bring in a lot of creative stuff, existential stuff. I like a lot of Jungian, just all these kinds of things. So there's different things that I use in my practice that would be completely different to what someone else might use in their practice. So there will be this view that we have on how we're talking about some of this stuff, but then
Mm.
another therapist might come in and be like, no, like that is not how we would approach that. The labels are important. They might think psychologists, for example, would definitely, I used to work in psychology previous to being a therapist, so those things do have more resonance, and there is a different approach around a lot of this stuff as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important to highlight because what we say about what therapy is not the answer. This is what therapy would be like with you or with me. And yeah, certainly for me at the moment, my practice is very purely person centered, which, like you say, fits within a humanistic umbrella. And within that kind of umbrella, the relationship is the most important thing. Like, and I think, there's lots of evidence, isn't there, out there that shows that that's true across various different modalities of therapy, that the relationship is the thing that makes the difference. And what that means, again, is something that as a client, it's quite hard to get your head around. I definitely remember coming into therapy for the first time myself and having no concept of that at all, only really as time's gone on through my training, getting to understand what the relationship between the client and the counsellor really means and how that has an impact on the client's ability to make progress. So yeah, I think from our perspective, probably that feels like the kind of cornerstone of what we do is how does this relationship exist between these two people and what influence is that having on what goes on in that room. Whereas for other practices, there may be a different focus on what might help someone.
Indeed, yes. And if we was approaching therapy way back, so even if we go back to Freudian times, bless Freud, is our founder overall. A lot of the time therapy was around clients projecting onto the therapist. And yeah, talking therapy looked very, very different. And it has become naturally more humanistic, whether you're humanistic in practice and approach at all. It has naturally become more and more open, more holistic overall. More people are person centered. There are different things that come into play. You can use different interventions. It's not so in the box, but it is still kind of the scaffolding around, I suppose, in how that person practices. And so, therefore, in sessions, that does look different. Like I say, before it would have been that it would have been encouraged to project onto the therapist, which I personally don't think is healthy because where's that going to go? And yeah, it does now in the talking therapies that we have bring out more trust and relationship because you're connecting with another human and not just this professional in front of you that has done this research and study and training and all of this stuff. It's actually a human being in front of you that is able to explore you and your life, all of those things based upon the scaffolding of theory and all of the other things around it.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to make because a lot of what you might see is kind of depictions of therapy may well be based more in that. And I think, in terms of what that means to someone coming to therapy for the first time, maybe it's quite hard to identify, like, okay, so what is that versus what we're doing? And I guess, there's a lot that we could say about that. Maybe we don't need to go into it all, but certainly there's more of a sense in a psychodynamic tradition of the therapist as the expert, analyzing the client and forming conclusions about what the client is doing, what processes are going on. Whereas in our practice, it's much more about allowing the client to be the expert in themselves, trusting them to find their own way. So the trust goes both ways, doesn't it? We have trust in our clients as a human in the same way that we're hoping our clients will come to trust us.
Yeah. Ironically, we've come full circle a little bit on that image that I described of sitting in an office on a sofa while someone talks at a therapist almost. The things we see in movies, for example, there's loads of it all on media. And ironically, that is that older version that we were just talking about a lot of the time. Obviously, movies are updating as well these days, but yeah, a lot of that is from that old traditional style of being a therapist. I know everything about you kind of version. I've done the training when realistically the person is in their head 24/7, aren't they? They are the ones doing the work. They are the ones that are going to go out of the room or off Zoom that day and have to live with thinking, feeling, and dealing with a lot of this stuff. So it's not that the therapist is the expert
Mm.
completely on that person. They're a professional, but the expert not so much on you as a person.
Yeah. And that is something I think as a client, it's quite hard to get your head around because, like you say, the client is with themselves 24/7. The therapist is with them maybe an hour a week. Um, you can never have, no matter how well trained we are, how much work we're doing, how close we are to understanding that person in that hour, that's all we've got. And I think what's really powerful sometimes is that there's often a moment where clients sort of seem to realize that and go, oh, if I don't say it, they won't know it. I can't expect this therapist to know what's right for me or to know what I'm thinking and feeling. I have to say it, and then we can talk about it. And I think that's a really powerful moment in therapy. And often, we talked about trust earlier as well. I think I remember an experience with a therapist many years ago. I didn't feel trust with them and I didn't say it. I didn't have the language at the time. I didn't have the confidence at the time. Now I feel very differently. And I think those sort of experiences of saying, I actually don't feel like I trust you right now, or I don't feel safe in this moment, can be really powerful in therapy because that might be bringing in your own experience of the world and relationship into that room and allowing you to really break it down in the moment with a person who can hold it and allow you to do that safely without feeling defensive or offended or whatever else it might be. So yeah, that sort of experience of that moment of, oh, I can say what is going on in my mind, and this person might not have already known it. They might not have figured it out for themselves.
Yeah. I love this point actually because are we trusted then because we're therapists? Are we trusted in a first session? Have we earned that?
Yeah, probably not, right? I mean, I remember that experience I was talking about. I think there was a number of sessions in, maybe 7 or 8 sessions in, and I just had this itchy feeling that something didn't feel quite right, and it didn't allow me to feel safe to talk about what I needed to talk about. And I look back on that now and think, well, that was about something that was going on in me. That wasn't about this person being a threat in any way or anything like that. It was something that was going on in me that I couldn't articulate, I couldn't open up about. And it wasn't something that I should have been concerned about saying because ultimately, why would we trust someone, at that early stage? Why would you walk into a room with someone and feel ready to open up about the things that feel most difficult for you? Of course you won't. And that does take time. And I think that's something that often people, maybe they'll walk away from a first session of therapy and think, oh, why don't I feel better? Why isn't it fixed? And that's kind of natural because the relationship hasn't built to that point yet where maybe you're not even talking about the actual issue yet. Maybe you don't feel safe to do that. And that's okay. It takes time.
Yeah, indeed. If, I mean, this is classic as well, quick fix. We kind of can link that back in as well in people's expectations sometimes with all the content on social media and all of the things that people are talking around in therapy. Unless they've experienced therapy, they kind of have a more of an understanding, but there's not a quick fix, is there? And it's not a 1 or 2 session type thing. There might be actually in certain circumstances where you've worked with someone for a long period of time and there might be something that happened that they want to revisit and explore and then go off and do life again. That's different. But when you're first accessing and when you are coming into therapy or returning and working on something big again, it's not a one session fixes all or two session fixes all. It is that relationship again, and being able to explore a lot of that deeper stuff and the things that are happening or whatever is relevant for you and what's going on right now. What would you say are some of the benefits then? So, if this is what it looks like and what's going on, and obviously in our approach, our version of that, what is it that people can get from it? What's the point? Why drag up the past? Why drag up the things that I fear the most? How is that going to help me?
Mm. I think the big one for me is it comes back to something I said earlier about like a lot of us have spent our lives acting a way that's not really us. And we've got those rules and those habits from somewhere. I guess therapy as an experience can help to kind of remove some of that pressure. You're in a relationship with a person who is not expecting anything from you, doesn't need you to act in a certain way, doesn't judge you any more or less, depending on how you act. And so you start to be able to become a bit more attuned to yourself and what you want and need in a way that maybe in the outside world doesn't always feel that possible because, you know, whether it's from family or friends or people in positions of authority over you, you're receiving messages all the time. You're okay if these things. And that can cloud our understanding of what makes us feel okay about ourselves. So I guess that for me feels like the big standout thing is that you're developing this relationship with a person who allows you to be exactly what you are, and that can create the confidence and the awareness to be that more out there in the real world and to identify the sort of things that get in the way of that and be able to then start changing that. And I think, you know, there's a phrase, isn't there, like awareness is choice. When you start to become aware of how those patterns are playing out, you can start to make choices about doing things differently. So it's not like you go into therapy, everything just changes and then you're a different person, but you can learn stuff about yourself that puts you on a path where you can then start to do things differently for yourself.
And that's the gem, isn't it? The awareness and being able to then make choices. That's ultimately what we want. When we bring kind of past stuff into it, just going to add to some of that too, in exploring the past can also help with exploring some of those patterns and where things have come from, why you are the way you are, why you choose this relationship when you know it's bad for you and it's unhealthy and it's like the one you previously had that was abusive, for example, but you still go along that path. Why are you doing that? Or why is it that you self-sabotage when something good happens for you, when you've worked really hard for it, but then it comes down to it and you don't kind of meet the deadline or you don't put in much effort, you kind of feel frozen. There's lots of things in people's day to day that comes up kind of in these patterns, if we was expanding what you said there. And some of that does come from the past stuff. Some of it's trauma, some of it is distorted versions of self-worth or love or connection and how you should live your life, conditioning, that kind of stuff. There's also bits of that in society. So it is it's a little bit of a minefield, honestly, isn't it? In
Mm.
what you do, exploring how you get to that root of what it is that is important for you. And what is interesting in some of this, even if it's not trauma based or looking at the past stuff, even if you ask someone who has a healthy life, who looks after themselves well, has a good job, has time to themselves, self care, healthy, supportive family. Even sometimes when I ask people some of the questions around what do you want from your life? How do you see your future? Most people won't go there. So again, it's not always the difficult bits, is it? It's connecting the patterns and things on some of the other things that are important for you in your life as well. And it gives you again choice
Yeah.
overall when that awareness comes. So the slogan for the practice is process, learn, and evolve, because that's kind of how I see how a little bit of a story time how I see kind of the process that we go through. We process from whatever the thing is, and then we learn from it, even though some things shouldn't happen, some things are really extreme, we still learn from it nevertheless. And then we move forward with choice, with an empowerment, with um, support, with knowing ourselves more in an ideal world, obviously. So it is through those things is that we then can, I guess, be more aligned, as you've said, with who we are and what we want and how we have relationships and how we function, all of these things.
Yeah, I really love that because I think sometimes people will come into therapy and think, oh, I'm just whinging about this thing, that's processing, isn't it? So I think that you're going to process, learn, evolve. It makes space for all of this. I just need to come and talk about it, or I'm trying to understand why I do this thing, or I know why I do this thing, and now I'm trying to change it. All of those things are part of what therapy creates space for. And they're all important, and they don't necessarily always happen in a linear way either. Or sometimes you might be evolving one part of your life while you're still processing something else. You're not necessarily going to be on this linear journey. You might be back and forwards. You might come one week and feel like you're really growing, and then come back the next week and think, oh, I'm down in the dumps and I just need to talk about this thing. So I love that, that kind of slogan acknowledges all of that is part of what goes on for us as people.
Yeah, not linear being key in that. A lot of the time, people have that expectation, don't they, that they'll come to therapy and they'll get this certificate and graduate, and life will be good for the rest of life. I'd love that. What a lovely thought. But life is life, isn't it? And life is suffering, and life is pain, and there's pockets of joy and connection and love. But we have to, nevertheless, still keep moving forward and still work on ourselves. And it's different parts of our lives that come into it. There's different parts that may be something you've worked on 5 years ago that may come up again because something's happened and it's took you back there, and psychologically you might resonate with some of that stuff. There may be old patterns coming out. So it's complicated, isn't it, in how it does show up in what you get from it. What would you say are some of the signs of change that you see in your clients when you
Mm.
have worked with them, without obviously sharing actual details? But overall, how do you know it's working, and what do you see in people that does show, oh yeah, this actually works? I'm not
Yeah.
just spending all my time and money on this thing, it's actually benefiting me.
I think one of the big things is really connected to what you've just said. I think that's one of the most obvious signs that someone is growing and experiencing benefits in therapy is the beginnings of acceptance of themselves. Um, yes, sometimes I act like this, but now I understand why I act like that. And I understand what situations trigger me to act like that. And I also know what things can help me to not act like that or to change it, or when I spot it, to do something differently. So I think that it's a mixture, isn't it, of all of that awareness of how to be differently, maybe having started to experience living life in a very different way than you'd ever done before, all the while accepting that there may be bits of what you are that creep back in, that maybe in the past you pushed away or you were embarrassed or ashamed of, that now you welcome in and say, okay, you're telling me something. What do I need to do differently? Maybe I need to go back and get some more support right now, or maybe I've just noticed this thing and I know that this bit of self-care or this reframing will help me to move on in a different way than I might have done in the past.
Yeah. Very well put. And yeah, a lot of description on kind of, I suppose, bringing it into how it is an actual experience, and it's not just like this thing that we complete, or there's different parts to it. There's different parts of us in life that will come into it. There's different life chapters that may look different from one of the others as well. Okay, so often I have questions around, does it feel worse before it feels better? And people talk about feeling raw after sessions, and there's different things that come up, and sometimes it's emotional, sometimes people struggle to share emotions. But we obviously are well versed on, today I feel this, today I feel angry, today I feel sad, today I feel joy. People don't talk in those terms. Often it's people avoiding emotions, suppressing emotions. The world is set up like that and pushed upon us like that too. In some ways, you have to just get on with it as far as responsibilities take over. So it can be difficult to step into therapy and feel all those emotions that you've not felt for years. It can be difficult to talk about things that bring you shame when you kind of bring some of it up. Often it's misplaced shame because that's how shame works the majority of the time. But nevertheless, fear, all these things, it's hard, isn't it? It's not easy. It's not just I'm going to do this course or this thing, I'm going to read this book and I'm going to learn from it and it's going to be magical. I'm going to get out my candle and do my journaling and I'm going to do some yoga in the garden because it's self-care. Like those things are beautiful and are very helpful, but the real work is grit. It's crying on a morning, it's crying before bed, and it's not understanding yourself, feeling like you're in a pit and you're stuck, and feeling like you're going round in circles. It's that real raw emotion that catches you off guard when something comes up. It's hard work, isn't it? And
Mm.
therapy also is stepping into that actively, intentionally, choosing to step into it. What would you say on regards to some of that stuff in why is it still important to do the therapy, even though it can bring up a lot and be really hard work?
Mm. Yeah, I guess like therapy reflects life, doesn't it? Therapy isn't different from life, it is part of life. And so, in the same way that in life you can feel happy, sad, disappointed, you can feel the deep lows and the real highs. You can feel those in therapy too. Don't think it always gets worse before it gets better, but sometimes it does. And sometimes, like you say, it's really uncomfortable and really painful. I know, like for me personally, that, and I think this is the same for a lot of people, there is or has been this sense of like there are the good emotions and then there are the bad emotions, right? Like the sadness and the anger and the shame are the bad emotions. And I think what you kind of start to work on through therapy is like actually emotions are just emotions. They are all there as a message telling you something. But a lot of us don't learn how to deal with, cope with, experience those emotions that we might term as negative. And that makes life really hard because there will be times when you feel sad. There will be times when you feel angry, where you feel disappointed, things haven't worked out the way you wanted them to. Therapy is a place where you can start to experience those feelings in the safety of relationship with another person who hopefully by that point you feel trusting with and who is not judging you and who is making space for you. So I think one of the reasons it's important to do it is because it's learning how to manage our own emotional field in a way that we might not have learned in the past. And I guess the other thing that maybe comes up is when we respond to emotion, we're not necessarily responding with our best interests in mind. Emotional responses can sometimes result in us making choices we maybe regret or wish we hadn't made. And, obviously it's important to feel emotional, to act emotionally sometimes, but being able to understand, like, okay, I'm feeling this right now. And I know that when I feel like this, sometimes I do X, Y, and Z. And actually, I don't love that. I don't really want to do that. So being able to identify that, and again, it's the choice thing, isn't it? Can I make a different choice here? Is there a different way that I can manage the fact that I'm feeling like this that doesn't require me to take these actions that I might historically have taken?
For sure. I think that's important actually in people think that emotional regulation is squashing your
Mm-hmm.
emotions and not feeling them so that you can perform, have a relationship, etc., etc., do life without emotions taking over. That's completely wrong. Emotional regulation is exactly as you put it, actually, in recognizing that these emotions are important and feeling them all the way through when they happen and maybe exploring them in therapy, doing some artwork and having an outlet, whatever it is for that person and how they emotionally regulate. It's important because then it doesn't have that build up, that doesn't have that intense blow up is what people are feeling because they don't deal with it in the moment or explore it, express it, etc. So when we see it differently and it's seen as data and not fact, also, might I add, because
Mm.
some people are reactive to their emotions and think that this is a fact. And without invalidating people's emotions, because people's emotions are actually true to them, but it's not fact always. It's not always in the reality. So, for example, fear. Fear is often not a true form of reality. It can serve us for sure. They all are there for a reason. It can keep us safe. It can challenge us. It can make us do things out of our comfort zone. There's lots of reasons for it, but it's not fact. When you kind of see it as that and are tuning into some of it and how you put it around exploring it and being able to not see them as good and bad, which is very, very common. You change your expectations and you use it almost as a compass or a sat nav, is how I describe it to clients. And then you also start to realize on a bigger picture of people expect emotions to be, they'll hit happiness and it'll be a continuum.
Mm-hmm.
And this will be it. They'll hit love and connect with people and it'll be this continuum. When actually we naturally do have a fluctuation. I can be happy this morning and feel content, and then by the afternoon I can feel stressed or tired. Tired is not an emotion, call myself out on that. There might be something that I've seen that's made me feel jealous. I might have some fears that have come up, and because I'm in tune with those things, I can use them for my advantage. And there's not a perfect version either. Even as a therapist with all the awareness in the world, my emotions catch me off guard too sometimes. But it changes the expectation, doesn't it? And I think where this comes from, kind of a little bit of a sidestep, is in something that I bring up with my clients when exploring emotions, is when we're younger, we're not taught emotions healthy. And it's not shade on parents. All parents do these kinds of things. But there's often things when you're a child, and most people will relate to this, of when you're crying, someone will say, oh, don't cry, it's going to get better. Or don't cry, save your tears worth something for crying for. Or don't cry, or I'll give you something to cry for. These phrases are thrown around in parenting so much. And these are the things that teaching us that crying is bad.
Mm.
Negative emotions, crying is bad, and therefore we must not do that and we must not show that. And most people don't cry in front of people, and most people won't say that they're sad or are struggling because of these reasons. And it's that conditioning from childhood in a lot of ways. So we're taught, and not just from parenting, there's also in society, we're taught to suppress the negative ones and only show the positive ones, and this expectation that it's going to be there at all times. So there's this pursuit of happiness, which is never attainable, which is also
Mm.
part of the process of what gets people down to, because then that leads into I'm not doing enough, I'm not enough, I'm broken, I can't do this, I was never meant to be for this, when actually you just need to regulate your emotions and keep
Mm.
moving forward.
Yeah. I really love as well the acknowledgement that like we're not perfect, and I feel it would be, it's important to say that, isn't it?
I don't
Therapists are
want
not
that
perfect.
pressure.
No, exactly. We're humans too.
Don't
And I
put
think,
me on a pedestal.
yeah, and I feel the same. It's really easy to sit here and say, like the important thing is to feel the emotion. I know that I don't always want to do that. I push away my sadness, and that's something that years of training as a therapist and years of therapy myself, I'm working on that. It's something that I'm better at now than I was before, but it's still a thing that I'm drawn to do. I'm still drawn to push that away or to sugarcoat it or whatever it might be. To think that when sadness arises, the goal is to get rid of it. It's not, but sometimes that can still slip in. So I think it's just important to acknowledge, isn't it, that we're not perfect, we're not experts, because that also creates an expectation in the room that people are sitting there thinking, well, you know how to do this, so why aren't you just telling me what to do? We don't always know, and it's all about giving that person the space to find their own path, isn't it?
Which ironically, linking that into the relationship stuff that you said, would create a power dynamic. And the power
Mm-hmm.
dynamic in the therapy, again, this is approach related. So a lot of Freudian old traditional versions of therapy would have a power dynamic. Psychologists also, there is quite the power dynamic, different ways of working. But in this style of working, you're on an equal human level, and that also brings out the relationship further because it deepens that trust, doesn't it? And these are comments I hear all the time, and being real with clients because they respect you for it, but they also connect with it more, and it makes the sessions less intense, even though they kind of are. And You can bring bits of humour in. It's therapy. You're not going to talk about only the nice bits, but it is the difficult parts for sure. But there is bits of humour. There is us being human in there, and interests pop in every now and again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that can feel quite scary, I think, when you start therapy as well, right? Because often you might be going there thinking, like, oh, I don't know how to deal with this. I'm feeling this stuff and I want it to be better. And there's a person sitting on the other side of the room going, well, I don't know either, you know? And I think that's something, again, that's one of those misconceptions about therapy, isn't it? But actually, as time goes on, you start to recognize the huge benefits that come from being in relation with another human being, rather than, you know, being with someone who's going to fix you. But yeah, at the start, that can feel scary. And I guess the kind of counterpoint to that is, no, this person isn't an expert on you. You know, they're not going to fix you. They haven't got a magic cure, but they can hold you. You know, they have got the skills and the awareness through their training to be able to create a safe space for you. And I guess that's the kind of counterpoint, isn't it, to that? You know, no, they're not perfect, they're not a magician, but they can create a safe space.
Sit beside you while you explore and process, learn, and evolve from
Mm-hmm.
your own stuff. I mean, I think therapy has I mean, overall, actually, not just therapy. I think the stigma in talking about things is shifting, and it's no longer that people believe, oh, I talk about these things, a van's going to turn up with a white coat, I'm going to be locked in a padded cell. That's not the version that people believe so much these days. It was when I first started working in services. I was only 19 at the time, so it was a scary thing for me to even go into as a career. So it has moved significantly since then, and obviously there's not asylums or any of this stuff anymore. It's a very, very different dynamic and relationship and approach and service, and there's so much that's different. Still, there is a little bit of fear around some of it, and these things that we've demystified, hopefully, if we've done our job right today, in some of the stuff that does come up. There is still some of that fear, isn't there? There is still sometimes people questioning, oh, what am I going to get from that? What's the point? All that kind of stuff. And I can completely understand it, to be honest. Yeah, there is different things that people will talk about, but only to a certain level, or there's places that it's not appropriate as well. So it's about having as much information on some of this stuff. Okay, some very good areas that we've explored today. If someone is searching for a therapist or is thinking about therapy for the first time, what would be something that you would say? What are your pearls of wisdom on how can you approach this? What would be the things that you would suggest to look for? How would you get ready for it as a person too? What do they need to
Mm.
do to prepare?
Wow, that's a tricky question to answer. I guess the first thing I would say is, like, there is no right and wrong way to do therapy. And so in a way, like, feeling as if you need to be in a certain place or have got to a certain point to be ready for it might be just something that gets in the way. So I would almost kind of try and remove all of that, actually, and say, you know, if you feel like you want to try it out, just go and try it out. If you're not sure about whether you're ready for it, whether you know how to use it in the best way, any of those things, you can talk about those things with your therapist. And actually, that's really valuable stuff at the start of a relationship, to really get under the surface of, what do you want from this? How do you think it's going to work? What are you worried about? All of those things really form a really strong foundation of the relationship, but also of, like, a working alliance that you can then use together to kind of move forward and make progress. So yeah, I guess from my perspective, I'm curious to hear yours in a minute, but I would almost try and think, don't try and prepare too much, you know, just go for it. In terms of finding a therapist, the obvious thing to call out as like a hygiene point is, find a therapist who is registered with an ethical body. You know, this is a profession in which people can choose to practice without any qualifications and call themselves a therapist. So go off and find someone who's registered, for example, with the BACP, like you and I are. Or there are other ethical bodies out there, but that would be my first thing. And then I guess the other thing, how I've always approached it, is find someone who you feel you can open up to. And it might be just from their picture, you can imagine talking to them. You know, we all have stuff going on our head subconsciously about the sort of people in terms of how they look that make us feel comfortable to open up. And I think that's a really important starting point, isn't it? If you can't feel safe to talk to them, it's going to be really hard work. And don't be afraid after a few sessions, if you feel like that's not coming and you're not forming that connection, either talk about it with your therapist if you can, or make a choice to find someone different. You know, sometimes it takes a little while to find a match. But yeah, curious on your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, you answered very well. I would mirror the being ready. When are we ready for anything? We
Mm.
often put off in society being ready to start the course, start the business, start
Mm.
a relationship. When are we ready? We want to go traveling, not ready yet. When are we ready? Of course, there's a part of preparation that we can do, and there's things that we can do moving towards it. There's also other factors, time, money, effort, all that stuff. But we're never ready for anything, ever
No.
completely. Ready for having children, often one that comes up, ready for getting married. There's loads of things, big, big decisions that we have in life, and we're never ready for them. And this is one of them, isn't it? And
Yeah.
when you take that pressure off yourself and just think, okay, I'd like to explore this thing, or I'd like to see where I can go with therapy and see what it opens up and explore, or I'm struggling with this thing and I'm going to explore it and just make an action, get in touch with someone, try and speak to them, or give as much information in the forms that you fill out. Go for a matching process, usually works better as well. And yeah, take that first step and then move with it and see how things play out. And really important on the feedback point that you made there of being open and honest with your therapist. Sometimes there's, as we're human, we don't always fully get everything 100%. It goes back to me not being in that client's head 24/7. I'm not a mind reader. I can get as close as possible to some of those things that are going on for them. I also have my training and interventions. I also know life. So there's different things, sure, but I can't 100% get in there. So if it's not meeting your expectations or something doesn't quite click for you, or the therapist has misunderstood something and it's not fitting right for you, say it. Hopefully, a good therapist will say this anyway in their contracting. It's part of my contracting in the practice, in the policies. But overall, your therapist should be open in these conversations anyway, because we want it to work too.
Yeah.
We're invested in it as well. So, yeah, if something is working really well as well, let us know. We can do more of it. And I think that's a key part that's missed out in finding the right therapist and in making the therapy work for you too. I would add another layer of there is a lot of online resources now, and some of it can be really helpful, and some of it can be actually really quite toxic. And there's a lot of quick fix mentality out there. And I'm not going to throw shade on the profession. Obviously, it's something that I really, really value. But I think there's a lot of things building false expectation, also labeling stuff, self diagnosis stuff. So I think I wouldn't research too much. The therapist is qualified for that reason. We do the training, so you don't have to. And some of it can be really good. I love talking about conversations. For example, when my clients have seen a podcast or they've read a book and want to learn about it. There's loads of different things that do come in like that, and we can have some really good discussions, but it's not an expectation, and sometimes it can dilute the sessions as well if it's false information or if there's self-diagnosis stuff. There's also some bad therapists out there. I'm not going to sit and pretend, this is the version of therapy that everyone gets and everything works and all of this stuff. There are some things, and you've kind of touched on that with the registration in the UK specifically. The registration is in debate right now. Not a lot of people will know this. So it's not regulated currently. There are governing bodies, so it's quite complex. Elsewhere in the world, it's very, very strict, and there's different policies and things that come into play. So there is a level of doing a little bit of research, just checking people have got their badge on the website, on their advertising, asking them. You can ask them outright, is it on their email? Just checking that they do have that registration, because it's there to keep us safe, isn't it? Overall, it's there to keep us safe, because if someone doesn't have that registration, I guess the dark side of that is they then are not doing the work on themselves, which is part of having your registration. Therefore, they are spilling into the sessions too. It's not about you anymore. Not 100% necessarily always, but it is that risk, isn't it? And it then becomes about them more in the session. And there's ethical things that come into it. There's also training elements, supervision, therapy. So, as part of the governing body, these are all things we absolutely have to get our registration. And this, I personally think, is a lot of work, of course, but it's right because this is a massive responsibility that we have. And I don't want my stuff ever. I don't want my stuff anyway, but I don't want my stuff especially to spill into a session. So it is a big responsibility, but it is important to seek that registration in a therapist. And yeah, anyone that's not or is kind of shy at giving their registration number or their badge number, I wouldn't work with them for that reason.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And maybe also important to mention that you can check that on the website of the ethical body. So, for example, you can go onto the BAC website and search for the name or the registration number of a therapist, and you can see if they're registered or not and what the status of their registration is. So, yeah, you don't have to take people's word for it. You can go and double check for yourself if you want to do that.
And this is on their actual website, isn't it? You can put in that person's name on the governing body.
Yeah.
In the UK, there are BACP and UKCP, also NCP, a few others. Those are the main ones. Worldwide, obviously, kind of there's an American one, obviously one of the biggest ones in the world. And different places have different governing bodies, so it's worth, obviously, for the worldwide clients here, to just check what is your governing body in your country. The practice here, silver linings, I guess just for reference too, for the worldwide clients, there is legislation around, as long as if you want to work with someone out of country, as long as they are in the jurisdiction of their governing body and you're aware of it and it's advertised as that, you're covered by their governing body, and you can also contact that governing body to check if that is something that you want to do. So you can kind of use different, it doesn't have to be only in your local town, for example. You can work with someone in Spain or Turkey or wherever it is, as long as you check their governing body registration too. Okay. Lots of cogs turning, hopefully, after today's exploration. Some really good points. Hopefully, we've made it seem less scary and removed the image of someone laying on a sofa projecting in the movies as therapy. Thank you for coming on the podcast, Harry.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've really loved the conversation. Yeah, lots of cogs turning for me as well. Appreciate it.